I don't believe men were created to be pawns in someone else's game. I believe we were created to be steward kings. Men under authority, yes, but entrusted with real responsibility. Not perfect men, but disciplined ones. Men who rule themselves, serve God directly, and refuse to live in fear. This is king, not pawn. There is a man you could become. There's this version of you that most people will never meet. Not because he doesn't exist, but because most men never choose him. You know, he he's not louder, he's not more aggressive, he's not trying to be seen, he's just aligned. He wakes up before the world does, not for attention, not for validation, but because he understands something very simple. You don't take control of your day will take control of you. He moves before distraction finds him, before noise fills his mind, before the world tells him who to be. And this is where I want to go ahead and talk about this idea of like a quiet morning, okay, where the room is still, there's no notifications, no voices, no opinions, just the man himself. Scripture open, mind clear, posture steady. No one sees this, but this is where he is built. He doesn't react to everything because he doesn't need to. Not every opinion requires his response, not every conflict requires his energy. Not every insult thrown out online requires his attention because he's learned something that most men haven't. And that's that silence isn't weakness, it is just control. He feels, for sure, those feelings, they are still there, but he's not ruled by them. He feels anger, but he doesn't explode. The desire that he feels it, but he doesn't indulge in it blindly. And he feels pressure, but with that pressure, he still doesn't collapse because he has learned how to govern himself. And a man who governs himself cannot easily be controlled by anything or anyone else. You know, he doesn't need to prove it. There's a calmness about him. He doesn't overtalk, he doesn't interrupt, he doesn't force his presence. But when he does speak, oh, it lands because his words are not rushed. They are measured, and measured men, as we've talked about before, they carry weight. Okay? This is the kind of man who, when he walks into a room, nothing dramatic happens, no announcement, no shift in lighting, but slowly something does change. Conversation settle, tension lowers, people listen more carefully, not because he demanded attention, but because he carries order. He's also the same man alone, and this is where most men fail. They perform in public and they collapse in private, but not him. The man that he presents to the rest of the world is the man he is when no one else sees him. His habits match his words. His discipline matches his image. His integrity holds strong under pressure. There is no double life. There is no hidden version of himself. There is just consistency. He chooses what is right, not what's easy. Okay? He doesn't follow comfort. He doesn't follow the crowd. He follows alignment, even when it costs him something, even when it isolates him and no one is there to applaud it, because he understands this one key thing. Easy decisions create hard lives, and hard decisions create strong men. He treats people well, even when it's not returned. He doesn't need to dominate. He doesn't need to belittle anybody. He doesn't need to win every single interaction placed in front of him, because his strength is not fragile, because he can be firm and cruelty be the furthest thing from his mind. He can be kind and still not actually be weak, and he can be direct with his answer about something without any form of arrogance. And that balance is rare, but it does exist no matter how much society would tell you it doesn't. Rare men like that are men who are remembered. Don't you forget that. And there's going to come a time where you're going to meet the kind of guy, and maybe you are him already, and if you are, fantastic. But there's a kind of man out there that doesn't escalate. Someone will just outright challenge him openly. This could be pushing him, testing him. The old versions of that man would react. He'd raise his voice, he'd assert his dominance. But not anymore. That man, he's steady. And it's in that moment that he proves something to himself. I'm not that man anymore. This same man builds quietly. He doesn't need to broadcast everything. He doesn't need constant validation from others because he is building something. His body, his mind, his faith, his future, brick by brick, day by day, without needing anybody in the world to watch because he walks with God. He doesn't just talk about him, he walks with him. This is the difference. He doesn't just speak about the faith. He lives it out in decisions, habits, discipline, and how he treats people and how he handles pressure from the world around him. God is not just this concept to him. He is alignment. This man, he's not perfect, okay? But he does return. He still makes mistakes. He still falls short. Still has his own personal moments of weakness. But he doesn't stay there. He returns again and again, back to alignment, back to discipline, back to God. It's that kind of consistency that builds something unshakable. And honestly, for you, this man is really not all that far away. He is in you. He's not unreachable. He's not reserved for a different kind of person. He is built through decisions, small ones, little ones, repeated daily. Okay, when you wake up instead of sleep in, when you turn away from something instead of indulging in it, when you speak truth instead of staying silent just because it's easier for those around you, when you stay disciplined instead of drifting just like all the normies and the NPCs in the world, okay? Listen to me, you are becoming him. You don't need to reinvent yourself overnight. You don't need to perform strength. You don't need to chase attention. You need to choose alignment again and again and again, okay? Become the man who doesn't need to prove who he is because his life as he lives it just makes it obvious. And when you do, you don't need the world's approval because you will know who you are becoming.